Hello and welcome to the Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today I'm looking at the 2007 series Ghost Rider: Trail of Tears. Back a couple of Octobers ago, I covered one of my favorite horror-themed comics, Ghost Rider: Road to Damnation, which featured the return of classic Ghost Rider Johnny Blaze as he found himself caught in a war between heaven and hell. The comic was created by a team that definitely grabbed people's attention. The art was fantastically done by newcomer Clayton Crain, whose computer-generated art was unlike anything anybody else was doing at the time, or really have done since. The writer for the series was none other than Garth Ennis, who had made himself into a giant in the comic book industry thanks to his series, Preacher. Another one-of-a-kind, wild romp across America, heavily featuring both heaven and hell as antagonists to our would-be heroes. So it's not really that surprising that, with their powers combined, the two created a comic that proved to be popular enough that there was an immediate demand for a sequel. Ennis, though, I'm sure didn't want to get caught doing an ongoing superhero series when he claims to not like superhero comics in general. So it fell on other creative teams to make a direct sequel to Road to Damnation. With that series running, when Ennis and Crain did return to Old Flamehead, they needed a different direction to take. And with that in mind, they decided to instead do a throwback to the very first original Ghost Rider. Now typically referred to as the Phantom Rider, this original Ghost Rider was a schoolteacher from the Old West who became a vigilante for Wild West justice in a glowing white outfit. He has no specific exact relation to the Ghost Rider we all know and love, though future stories would see crossovers between the characters. And then, eventually, we would have this story, an unrelated tale to any others previously, that brings the Phantom Rider in full fury back to the Wild West as a spirit of vengeance. And I do mean vengeance, so yeah, I'm gonna give another content warning because Ennis is never one to shy away from offensive concepts, language, and violence of any and all kinds, pushing this comic to the very limits of what a Marvel comic would be allowed to get away with. But if you're good with all that, then let's go west, young man, and take this away. The comic opens on the Civil War. Not that Civil War. I mean the actual Civil War. This way you know right away what a happy, fun, and exciting adventure this is going to be. And if the bleakness of the subject matter didn't convince you, then Crain's art certainly should, with its extreme focus on dark colors, shadows, and intense bodily destruction. Seriously, guys, this comic don't mess around. A man named Travis Parham is attempting to lead a Confederate charge in battle against the damn Yanks, but those cheating northern bastards have Gatling guns that just tear their opponents apart. And what the guns don't kill, the cannons will. I do have to note that I enjoy Ennis taking a pause from all the massacring to reference General Grant's alcoholism. History jokes. I also love Crain making all the war scene panels as if they were compiled from old photographs. I'm not entirely sure why they do it, but it looks cool. Parham gets knocked out by a cannon explosion and wakes up in the middle of the night to find himself in a field of dead bodies. Another man, Caleb, is there salvaging from the equipment left behind. And he rescues Travis and brings him home with him. Though, can I point out that rats wouldn't just show up wherever there's dead bodies and start eating them. In what is most likely the Wild West like this, there probably wouldn't be rats out there at all, more likely buzzards. And even if there were rats, bison at least are herbivores. They don't eat meat. Come on. When Parham wakes up a few days later, he's surprised to learn Caleb is a black man, a former slave who managed to buy freedom for himself and his wife, then bought a farm where they could live and raise a family. Parham is especially surprised because as a Confederate soldier, he would expect Caleb to hold a grudge against people like him for, you know, literally fighting a war because they wanted to enslave him again. But Caleb makes it clear that he doesn't care and that as far as he's concerned, they're just two men living life on equal footing. Parham takes Caleb's words to heart and stays on the farm for years longer than necessary to pay Caleb back the debt he owes him for saving his life, and together they work the land into a proper, functioning farm. The most notable event comes one day as T-Par here is passing through the nearby woods while wearing his best Prince cosplay. You almost got it, dude. Just add in some neck ruffles. And he discovers a cave with a glowing skull inside. When he touches it, he sees, I don't even know what? Caleb pulls him out from this nightmare world and explains that it's some old religion stuff with old gods from traditions his family brought with them from Africa. I'd like to see some historical records actually linking shit like this with anything people actually did in Africa in the old days. Otherwise, I don't see much difference between this and those old racist Alan Quartermain stories, but anyway, maybe it's the nightmares the vision gave him, but Parham finally starts to get a little antsy and decides it's about time that he gotta move on, saying he's going to head out west to seek his fortune. But as he's leaving, someone else is apparently arriving. These assholes. And this is where things get especially messed up, so you more sensitive types may want to skip about a minute or so. These proto-clan members are led by a man named Reagan and include 11 other people. A 4-person family called the Dragwells, a man named Holly and his son, a man called Banjo, another called Nightshade, an apparently ex-Confederate soldier Sergeant Billy, and 2 brothers named Lim and Rufus Coulter. All 13 men ride down and attack Caleb on his farm with his wife and 2 kids, and proceed to do all the most horrible things Ennis could think of to do to them, including having the entire gang rape Caleb's wife one by one before killing her. Yeah. I was not kidding about that content warning thing. Reagan's gang aren't done then either. They then nail Caleb's sons to a tree until they get tired of their screaming and shoot them. They forced Caleb to watch the entire thing before Reagan gives a speech about how no matter how hard people like Caleb struggle, there'll always be men like Reagan who punish them for trying to go above their place. And, you know, he's not wrong, at least about there still being racist shitheads in power. They leave Caleb for dead, and Reagan gives the farm to the Coulter brothers, which is why when Parham returns from the West after 2 years to visit his good friend, he instead finds these 2 wastes of space squatting in his place. Parham's none too happy to learn of what happened and quickly murders the Coulter brothers for their part in the events, then sets out to hunt down the rest of the gang as well. He comes to a town where Reagan and his gang had been staying, keeping a bunch of slaves despite the fact that the Civil War was over by this point. When Reagan's group heard a troop of Union soldiers were coming, they shot all the slaves to prevent them from being freed and one of the soldiers who had come to investigate, and then lit out of there. All except the Dragwells, who hadn't been involved in any of that, so Parham goes to them first, only to find some form of horrible vengeance had already visited them. He finds one body nailed to the ground by its hands and feet and apparently burned down to a skeleton. Another body strung up and apparently, bled to death from its groin, I think? And a third body, I don't even know what. I guess it has, like, the fence shoved inside of it from behind or something? YouTube's totally gonna take this video down, isn't it? But there were 4 Dragwells, as we saw in the one shot earlier, and the last one finally shows up, walking as just a twisted, messed up corpse, and as it nears Parham, it just kinda burns up and crumbles away for no apparent reason. Though he doesn't know what the hell is going on, Parham decides to continue his quest, so we catch up with Reagan, who's looking a bit like Freddy Krueger now for some reason, and his gang shortly after they finished massacring a small village of Native Americans that only consisted of women and children, since all the men were away at the time, in order to steal from them. Only they had nothing to steal, but that's just a small inconvenience to these guys. I mean, we need a difference between the good guys and the bad guys, so the bad guys just kill a little bit more indiscriminately. And that's how you know who's who. One of the native women suddenly rises up and informs them that someone is coming for them, but after a hail of bullets, they finally get her to lie down again and be quiet. When they make camp for the night, a mysterious rider shows up and grabs up Sergeant Billy in chains and drags him through the camp, taking a bullet to the head and then shooting fire out of his eyes to burn up a tree that all their horses were tied to. The gang grabs the horses and tries to run away, but find themselves somehow magically transported back to the same place. This delay gave Parham time to finally catch up to the gang, and while they're worried about what the mysterious rider is going to do, Parham shoots off Banjo's Kazooie, and most of his leg with it. Meanwhile, the mysterious writer has chained each of Sergeant Billy's limbs to a horse pointed in a different direction, and when he sets off another fireball, well, you can kinda guess what happens, I'm sure. The writer then grabs up both Holly and his son and kind of smashes them together so hard that they sort of become a weird hybrid body thing. That leaves the only remaining members of the gang as Nightshade and Reagan, and Nightshade, after having his arm nearly blown off by Parham, turns to his leader for direction, only to find the man eating a heart. I think that's Banjo's heart? It could be Billy's, I don't know. You've seen one racist asshole's heart, you've seen them all, am I right? Reagan then shoots both Nightshade and himself, denying the writer his vengeance, because as Parham has realized, and you probably have as well, the writer is Caleb reborn as a demon of vengeance. While dying, Caleb made his way to the cave with the skulls and made a promise to the giant skinny flaming skull thing and became its living embodiment on Earth. Ghost Caleb tells Parham to move on with his life, and he attempts to, but before long, some ghost riders in the sky come down from a red cloud and start a whole new level of massacres, killing an entire town. They follow Parham as he rides out to warn another town, though they don't believe him, and Caleb ends up getting distracted by a prostitute at the bar. Though she just looks a lot more like any kind of regular woman from the early 2000s than a woman from the late 1800s to me, but oh well. After an apparently short trip upstairs, Travis and Jenny over here start making plans to go out to California and make their fortunes. Only the Red Fog Ghost Riders show up to attack this town right then, revealing themselves to be, you guessed it, Reagan and his riders return from the dead. You see, earlier we saw Reagan making a deal with an old Native American medicine man, and that old man taught him how to make a further deal with some demons that hold a grudge against the spirit of vengeance. And so those demons let the gang return to the world as unstoppable ghost demon things in order to smoke out the flaming skull and bring him back down to hell. So they capture Jenny and Travis Parham, now a one-armed man after Nightshade ripped his arm off in vengeance for nearly having lost his own earlier, and then bring them and the other townspeople into the street to hold them hostage in the hopes of getting their prey to show himself. Which he does, though he claims in the coolest way possible that he doesn't give a shit about no hostages. No, you're right, Caleb. You sure as hell don't look like the spirit of mercy. So Caleb immediately starts ripping into the ghost gang, first blasting apart the conjoined Hollies, then Billy, and lastly Banjo, leaving once again just Nightshade and Reagan. Nightshade realizes that while Caleb may not care about most of the hostages, he might care about Parham, so he grabs up Parham to threaten him while simultaneously doing, I'm not really sure what, to Jenny that seems to make her head just entirely explode. Really? Did you have to? This tactic works as we see the writer for the first time leave his vengeance form and revert back to just Caleb. Reagan and Nightshade immediately start putting the man in chains in a not at all completely on the nose kind of way, so they can drag him away from his home and take him somewhere he doesn't want to be. Do you get it yet? But despite the chains, Caleb just turns back into the writer with an explosion of energy that takes them all to some deep dark hell where both Nightshade and Reagan finally meet some form of an end. Parham and Caleb then have a spirited, no pun intended, philosophical discussion about vengeance and hate and what it does to a man, ending with Caleb saying that he is not the first of his kind and he will be far from the last, before another explosion ends the conversation. We then jump to some point in the future when an old, armless Parham sits and drinks at a bar alone, and we sit and get to the breakdown. I guess it should come as no surprise that this comic, like this creative team's last one, tends to showcase all the strengths and weaknesses of both Ennis and Crain. Ennis is honestly a strong and capable storyteller who does a great job of world building and expertly weaves his stories together while keeping them moving forward and packed to the brim with action. Ennis's ability to give unique voices to each character continues to astound me, and is to the point where you can almost tell who's talking just by what words that are being used in the speech bubble. It's honestly a sneaky little fake out because given most of his comics, you'd expect him to just be some simple crass writer who delights in disgusting you, and, well, he is, but he's also clearly more than capable of being so much more. Which means that he's choosing to be that way, and therein lies the problem, at least for me. All those uniquely voiced characters all end up just being total asshats that exist primarily to offend you, and much the same could often be said about the story itself. Subtlety and tact are not what Ennis goes for, and I know he and his fans might argue that that's the entire point. To peel back the covers and show the world at its darkest, dirtiest, and most disgusting. And that's fine, and I get that, I do. But euphemism exists for more reasons than just to keep from hurting people's sad little feelings. Or whatever. Sometimes not showing a thing is more powerful than showing it. Like in the weirdly beautiful image Crain does here of Billy being drawn and quartered. I remember this image a heck of a lot more than I probably would if it had been just more blood and guts and gore everywhere. And that brings me to Crain's art, which is just by and large amazing, and I love it, and I do wish he did more comics. Of course, as always, it's often too dark for its own good, though in this case, some of that might be intentional to sort of self-censor some of the gore to keep from getting in trouble. While it does still make it hard sometimes to tell what's going on, for the most part in this series, I feel that was only a problem maybe once or twice. And mostly I feel like you can tell Crain was really starting to grow as an artist by this series. So all that said, I'm giving this a series recommendation level of high. If you have a really strong constitution and you enjoyed any other work from either of these creators, I definitely recommend checking this comic out. The collected edition gets one Broken Saber, which is not a good thing. I mean, duh. We're talking a collection that costs $20 and it comes with 6 issues and literally no bonuses of any size, shape, or form? Really? Really? Thanks everybody for watching and happy Halloween! September and October are always some of my favorite months to cover for the whole year because I get to do some of the stuff I love the most, and that is read Spider-Man comics and read horror-themed comics. Even though, as I said, I don't read a lot of horror comics, I really enjoy the aesthetic of horror, so, you know, it's still fun to get to cover it. Anyway, if you like any of those things as much as I do, or if you like, say, the New 52, which is most of what I cover for the rest of the year, then make sure to hit that like button, and the subscribe button, and the notification button probably too, you know, I don't know, just throwing that out there. And then make sure to stick around for next time, and I hope to see you then, right here, in the Comic Cave.